Teacher, is today really your birthday? Teacher, is today really your birthday?
Huh? Yes. Yes, it is. Wait. How did you find out?
Happy
Happy
birthday!
birthday!
Teacher, drew you a portrait. I drew the stars and planets.
I provided the pretty colorful crayons.
Akira, we did the coloring, but you broke all of my crayons, so your crayons are mine now.
What? Nuh-uh. You stay away from my crayons. Mine.
No, mine. No.
Sakura came up with the gift idea.
Uh, uh, mm, I hope it's okay.
Aw. Thank you, children. I love it. I will treasure and frame this. Uh, ah, it's me as an astronaut. Huh. Uh, Floating in space, it seems, and surrounded by stars. And are those croquettes?
Have come with a box of delectable morsels called donuts. Please, help yourselves.
Yay!
Woohoo!
Kids, wait! Lunch is in about an hour. Okay, just this once I will allow it.
Hurry up! Have some donuts and don't forget to invite your number one friend. It's time to Adashima and chill.
Chapter 1. If everyone was little. Every child is different. Though they are mostly similar in terms of height, they personally do not match at all, allowing you to tell them apart at a glance. Furthermore, as children are in general adorable, most people find themselves wanting to protect them. That is how the world works. The weak are looked after until they grow strong. In a strange way, life itself felt like something I could manage relatively well back in those days. And yet, the current me was far more unique as a person compared to how I used to be in my childhood. There was a lot of variance between the kids in front of me. One girl had blue hair, and another child currently playing with her always wore a hat. Truly, they were all unique in their own way. Maybe not as unique as the girl and her strange hair, but still. It was currently free time, and the hallways and classroom were both bustling with children running in all directions. The noisiest, or should I say most energetic, of the senior kids were Shima and Taru, the latter always chasing after the former. With both of her hands stuck in front of her, Shima continued running forward, her stubby feet making an amusing sound as they repeatedly came into contact with the floor. The way she ran was as peculiar as ever, and yet there was something strangely soothing about it. As for Taru, well, she could be found run right behind her as was tradition, her hand in turn raised above her head. She too was weird in her own way, but also adorable. Both of them were. As good as it felt watching the two have fun, there was a downside to it. You could never relax, as they were noting what hijinks they might get up to next. Shima especially was quite reckless, and though it was good that she didn't put up walls between herself and the other children, I do wish she would have been conscious of the walls of the building. Why was it that running with her arm in front of her so often led to her bumping her forehead against things? I watched as the girl ran through the center of the classroom. Coincidentally, I wasn't the only one doing so. No, there was someone else too. Shifting my attention toward her brought me face to face with a scene I'd grown quite familiar with. The girl in question was sitting silently all by herself. Her hands were playing with clay, but her eyes followed after Shima, the one running in the lead. If I had to rank this year's seniors class in terms of being problem children, I would likely put her in the number one spot. Her being Sakura. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't that she got into fight with the other kids or anything like that. She wasn't particularly bothersome either. No, the difficulty with tending to her came about in a different way. She hardly ever talked, barely reacted to anything, and all in all, had a lot of trouble communicating with her surroundings. Based on the conversation I've had with her mother, it seemed to be how she was home as well. There was no making sense of that child, the woman had stated, with a pained smile on her face. Part of me wondered if that truly was so, though obviously I'd been in no place to be making such objections. Despite how she appeared at a glance, I actually found the way Sakura behaved, while here surprisingly easy to comprehend. She didn't have anyone she was particularly close to, and though this limited the interaction possible for her, there was one girl who didn't care, Shima. She approached her as she would any other kid, which in turn seemed to have led Sakura to hold a certain interest toward her. And yet, she never made an effort to talk to herself. Though she obviously wanted to play with Shima, she simply wasn't able to make the words come out of her mouth. And she really did want it. It was evident from the way she acted that Sakura wished for nothing more than Shima to walk over to her, to play with her, to notice her. Rather than being too shy about it, the impression I was left with was that she simply didn't know how she was supposed to go about talking to her. The more friends surrounded Shima, the further back she withdrew. The two people who most strongly contrasted with Sakura were Akira and Tae, currently busy playing among themselves in the corner. As far as I was able to tell, this game of theirs consisted of one person wrapping their arm around the other and lifting them in the air, or something. Whereas Tae, the one being carried, smiled without much care. Akira, the one doing the carrying, didn't seem to appear to share her enjoyment. The girl's face was practically bright red.
This seemed to signal her being at her limit, and wouldn't you know it, it was only mere moments later that she collapsed on the floor, dropping the other child she'd been carrying. Tai quickly crouched down next to her.
Well done.
Yeah, now reward.
This request was met by Tai grabbing her hand and pressing her lips on her forehead. I could see Akira grin. Those two really did get along. Honestly, it was more often that I saw them together than by themselves. Speaking of which, I'd actually been invited to Akira's house, once by her parents, and let me tell ya, that place was a real mansion. A bamboo grove between the streets? Seriously? It had taken me more than a couple of moments to comprehend what even happened. To make matters worse, I'd mistaken the young person who came to greet me to be her father, only for him to politely correct me and tell me that he was, in fact, her older brother. Again, confusing. Going from the pair of good friends back to Sakura, the girl was still staring at Shima, now playing with building blocks on the floor alongside Taru. The blocks connected like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle and were currently being used to form what appeared to be a half-completed house. A moment ago, the girls had been running around, but the instant I took my eyes off them, they moved somewhere else entirely. No part of me envied the parents of these two rascals. While that was good and all, the thought of leaving Sakura like this did cause me to hesitate, and ultimately, I was forced to conclude that it would be for the best if I gave her a hand. It wasn't my desire to meddle with the relationships between the children. It really wasn't. And yet, she simply looked too pitiful to ignore.
Shima, could you come here for a second?
I called out to the girl, completely absorbed in her little roof construction project. Gripping a building block in her hand, Shima ran up to me.
I promise, teacher, I've not broken anything today.
I promise, teacher. I've not broken anything today.
Her hands remained placed on top of her head as she scanned my expression. Wait, so she knew?
Yes, and that's good. Now, it looks like Sakura would like to play with you as well.
I could see Sakura jolt in the corner of my eye as I said that. It appeared that she was listening.
Okay.
Shima nodded obediently, before turning around and dashing to where the other girl was currently sitting. This prompted Sakura to jolt once more, this time with double the intensity. Her head hung, she pretended not to notice. Shima didn't care, however, and instead,
Hey, come.
grabbed her hand without any sort of instruction and pulled her up on her feet. The clay she'd been playing with stayed on the floor. Confused, the girl looked at Shima, then at me, then at Shima again. The restless movement of her eyebrows indicated anxiety, but also happiness at the same time. Shima proceeded to drag her along, and Sakura, well, she pretty much just allowed herself to be dragged.
Here, a block. Put it where you want.
Shima said, as she handed her the building block she'd been carrying. With that done, she returned to construction work, picking up from where she'd left off. And yet, Sakura didn't join her. All of the earlier joy had vanished from the girl's face, and, if I'm being honest, it looked like she might start crying any second now. Taking a slightly longer path than Shima had, she once again closed the distance between the two of them, before grabbing the other girl's hand and pulling on it.
Huh? What?
Let's play over there.
By over there, she was referring to a lonely spot where she'd been sitting all by herself earlier. Though brave, her attempt was met by failure, as Shima showed no sign of moving, instead choosing to stare at her puzzled, while holding up the block in her hand. Desperately, Sakura yanked her arm again, this time harder. It looked for a second like she might end up being dragged along, but ultimately the girl held her down.
Let's play with everyone.
Keep to yourself.
Teru followed. The two girls appeared to be completely against their idea. Met by their reaction, Sakura's shoulders twitched. Oh no. Tears began welling up in her eyes. Should I swoop in? Or not? Unsure how to proceed, I sat there, observing the situation before me. It seemed that my attempt to do good had resulted in failure. She wanted to play not with everyone, but by herself. That was the kind of girl Sakura was. Was one of those approaches more correct than the other? I couldn't really answer that. Making that sort of value judgments wasn't something I wanted to be doing. At the same time, she was pretty awkward around others, wasn't she? That was the impression I was left with. Part of me wondered, when she started going to school, would she be able to make friends?
Friends need to be cherished.
The sudden voice caught me off guard. I turned my head and saw that it belonged to a girl who had, at some point, appeared next to us. Her blueness only added to the mystery. Like the one playing on the other side of the room, she was yet another girl with blue hair. They both shone with the same soft light as well. And really, the only difference between the two was found in their hairstyles. The long hair of the closer girl was tied behind her head in the shape of a butterfly. The rest of it dangled straight down, giving off the impression of a waterfall. All in all, these factors combined to form a dreamlike whole, and if not for the onigiri in her hand, it would have been difficult for me to believe she was actually real and not just a figment of my imagination. From the center of the triangular food item stuck out a piece of kombu seaweed.
Everyone always says that, so it's probably the way it is with Earthlings.
The girl's water bottle swayed at the end of a short stick as she stated that. Considering the rain currently happening outside, it wasn't hard to see why her choice of outfit appeared so curious to me. She almost looked like she was dressed for a picnic.
Huh? Who are you?
Shima seemed just as shocked by the girl's sudden appearance as I was. Then, a few moments later, she proceeded to straighten out her bag, almost as if planning to stand against her.
Heh, it's much for me at present.
With those words, she took Shima's hand and started to spin. The two spun around together. What was happening?
They continued far longer than I would have anticipated, only stopping when the girl's feet eventually grew tangled.
Oh, oh.
The now released Shima exclaimed as she staggered around in an attempt to regain her balance, her eyes having turned into spirals.
So, what do you think?
In a similar manner, the girl also hopped about while asking her dad, just what was up with her?
What are you doing?
Heh heh heh. This is the inevitable outcome when you do something like that without caring what happens.
Despite the proud look on her face, she too appeared to be having a lot of trouble keeping herself from tumbling over.
Of course, when you're as strong as me, then it's a different story.
The girl went on to straighten out her back. Again, she was clearly still in the process of trying to steady herself, and looking at her from behind, it was easy for me to tell based on the way they were twitching that she had to force her feet to stop them from moving around. Assuming a slightly gentler tone, she then spoke.
Nothing big can be done while you're still not used to it.
With those words out of her mouth, the girl turned to look at Sakura, prompting her to immediately hang her head. Coming under gaze of someone she didn't recognize was simply too much for her to endure. I wasn't sure why the girl chose to react to this by laughing wholeheartedly, but she did. I was left shifting my attention between the two. Shima's head moved in a similar manner. I see. While her choice of how to express herself was still a complete mystery to me, I now more or less got what the girl was trying to say. So, how is it? That was the question her actions conveyed. Shima turned to look up at her, and as if absorbing the blue shine of her hair and pupils, her own pure eyes once again grew tinged with a similar color. Following this, she then
I don't really get it, but okay.
nodded her head.
Today I shall play with Sakura.
Her statement sounded oddly poetic and old fashioned for some reason. Was that something she'd picked up from that kid who always wore a hat? I wonder, who was he imitating with those weird expressions he occasionally mixed into his speech? I'd almost managed to arrive at a conclusion when something else caught my attention. It seemed that Shima had figured out what it was that the girl was trying to convey to her. She turned her head around, prompting Sakura's expression to brighten. Even if she was still clearly holding back tears, the corners of her mouth grew to be pointed upwards, and, in a similar fashion, her eyes opened wide.
But once you stop being flustered, let's play with everyone else too, okay?
This statement of Shima's was met by Sakura slightly drawing in her chin. What she meant by it, that was anyone's guess. Regardless, she then grabbed her hand for a second time and pulled her to where the clay from earlier was sitting. All in all, it was pretty amusing arrangement. Shima, the one always pulling others along, was now dragged by Adachi, the one with a tendency to act introverted. What wasn't amusing though was the unsatisfied look on Taru's face, annoyed that her friend had been taken away from her. Yes, it was difficult trying to satisfy everyone. Were I to swoop in to comfort her, would she accept me or turn me down? As I was busy scratching my head over that, I found that the girl from before had at some point appeared next to me. She was laughing with her chest puffed out.
In side stories, I act as the mediator.
Not only did her statements sound like a total nonsense to me, the girl was also taller than all the other children. Had we always had someone like her here? She wasn't on any of my lists, that was for sure.
Whose kid are you again?
The fact that she was munching on an onigiri was more than a bit odd, too. We'd already had lunch by that point.
Of course, this is not a proper pass, but rather a what if scenario showing what might have happened were they to meet at this stage. Yes, yes.
Um,
Would you like a drink?
The girl's question was followed by her presenting me with her water bottle.
huh? Uh, oh, thanks.
I replied before taking the bottle and pressing it on my lips. What flowed into my mouth was fermented milk, so sweet I couldn't help but wonder if it was perhaps undiluted. It also kind of stuck in my throat. Though watching her drink it, that seemed to be a problem which only affected me.
Still, it is unfortunate that Shou isn't here.
Having said that, the girl ran off. She was the kind of person who didn't care about listening to others. Sweet, yet suspicious. That was how I describe her. I wonder, was it really okay for me to just ignore her?
What do you want to make, Sakura?
Hima asked while kneading the clay in her hands.
What? Mm, what should we? Mm, hmm.
You could hear the girl's voice waver ever so slightly as she responded. It was there that I really got a sense of just how susceptible she was to such acts of kindness. Then, albeit awkward, a smile appeared on Sakura's face. That was it. All the anxiety that had been building up in my chest instantly disappeared, flushing down into the depths of my stomach. She was a difficult child, yes. No doubt would her life be filled with many hardships going forward. And yet, as long as she knew that, she'd definitely choose the right path. As long as she knew how to smile, everything would be just fine.
Chapter 2. I'll come to meet you, even if you say nothing. It was, for the first time in my life, that I found myself experiencing something akin to anxiety approaching the summer break. The long vacation meant that I was no longer bound by the same rules I was during school days, and though that did fill me with the same temporary sense of liberation I always felt when casting myself into it, this year those feelings were far more discomposed than normal. There was something in the center of them, something noisy. My arms and legs flailed around in a desperate attempt to try and find something, anything to support them. Today marked the final day of the school term, the closing ceremony. I was currently in the classroom, staring at Shimamura, who was also there. A yawn escaped my mouth, and just as I moved to wipe away the lone tear flowing down my cheek, our eyes happened to meet. I immediately turned my head away. I didn't have anything to be ashamed of, and yet I always found myself staring at my feet like I did. What was up with that? Was I perhaps too embarrassed to have noticed that I'd been staring at her? If so, it was already far too late. Would it be better if I just kept staring at her then? No, but. Hesitating, I moved my head up and down, back and forth. I was so embarrassed. So insanely embarrassed for some reason. A conflict of emotions raged wildly inside my head, while at the same time lines of cold sweat ran down both my palms and neck. It might well have been that I acted the most restless when in the classroom. That, or to put it more simply, I was pretty flustered. I put my bag in order while the teacher said her parting words, and then, once that was over, immediately headed over to Shimamura's desk. She also turned towards me right away, almost as if she'd been anticipating this. Awkwardly, I lifted my hand and began to greet her. However, before I could,
You always turn your head away when our eyes meet, huh, Adachi?
Shimamura managed to sneak in a comment of her own. Having had their moment stolen, my lips were left to simply flop open and close. It was like I was speaking, but instead of words, what came out of my mouth was empty air. She took this opportunity to add,
It makes me think of an animal running back to their nest.
"Oh." I could see her giggle a little as she stated that. Am I supposed to feel embarrassed here? Was I not? The true nature of the emotions raging about in my head escaped my grasp. Part of me figured it couldn't have been that bad of a thing if she was laughing, but at the same time, I also knew that getting laughed at meant you'd done something very much worthy of considering. What should I do? What should I do? While I was busy agonizing over that, Shimamura went and lifted her bag. Deciding to omit the suggestion of us going home together, I lined up next to her.
Oh,
A bizarre sound left her mouth as she stared up at me.
Huh? What is it?
nothing. I'm just surprised you're wearing the hairpin again.
It wasn't really what I'd expected her to say, and before I knew it, I realized I'd brought my hand up to my hair. Softly, my fingers stroked the flower-shaped ornament I'd received from her.
You like it?
She asked, to which I replied by nodding my head up and down multiple times. This prompted Shimamura to smile once more. We then began walking. My heart pounded intensely, not because we were running fast or anything like that, but rather because I couldn't stop thinking about the ornament in question, as well as its identical copy, the one that garnished Shimamura's hair. The stairs grew closer and closer with each step, and it was there that my senses activated, warning me of an impending danger. Us, drifting apart without a word, seemed like a real possibility. Chills ran through my body, followed by lines of cold sweat.
Ah, um, summer break? Huh?
Yep, it sure is.
A step, then another. What else could we talk about? The cicadas sure were loud, huh? No, that definitely wasn't going to lead anywhere.
Might you have any plans for summer, Shimamura?
I decided to ask that in a slightly unusual way compared to how I would normally do it. In response, her back arched a little.
Nope. No plan in particular.
She went out of her way to match my question and tone.
My initial reaction was to feel embarrassed, although thinking about it a bit more, I realized what this meant and lifted my head.
In that case, is it okay if I text you and stuff?
Sure thing. I mean, you always do that.
Right. Still, I might end up doing it a lot, so.
It's fine, it's fine.
Compared to me, currently in the process of being filled with emotion, Shimamura showed no signs of anything of the sort. At this point, I might as well go ahead and say everything I wanted to say, right? Though definitely greedy, that was the conclusion I reached.
Also, if you're free, do you mind if I come over every now and then?
Be my guest.
Shimamura replied, before giving my chest a light tap. While reassuring, it also caused me to stagger. Lightly. Stagger lightly. Light certainly was a word I used to describe my current state. Hollow, even. Oh, but don't get me wrong. It wasn't the case that being touched by Shimamura was making me tremble. Of course not. Rather, what it did was fill me with anxiety. Even though school offers us a perfect point of connection, it will sadly be going away with the beginning of summer break. No doubt I will be left feeling empty inside, for the outcome of that to be us not doing anything together. Cicadas put their whole being into their song. Why? Because they, too, wanted to leave behind a lasting mark. A mark which showed they'd been alive. In more ways than one, that was something I needed to learn how to imitate for myself. We walked down the stairs. There, gripping my shoes, I spoke out her name.
Shimamura.
Hmm?
She turned to look at me over her shoulder. A bed of cold sweat ran down my neck, disappearing inside my rust collar. The dimness of the shoe rack, mixed together with the light shining through the doorway, and it was there that I could see it. See the entrance leading this summer. I felt a certain pull towards it, a pull which cleared my mind of the feeling that I was about to pass out, letting me instead focus on forcing my mouth open and state the following.
I was thinking, it would be nice if we could use the summer break to go even closer. Yeah.
The second half of that sentence came out way faster than the first, and by the end of it, my thinking was barely even keeping up. Likewise, my forehead was left feeling like it might soon catch fire. What had that yeah been about? Why was I agreeing with to my own statement?
Closer. Huh.
And Shimamura chose to react in a reserved manner, almost as if she didn't fully get what I was talking about. At least, that was how it appeared to me. I wanted to explain it all in full detail, tell her what I really meant. At the same time, I had to wonder, what sort of face will she make if I were to do that here? Like, for example, what if I suggested we go to the pool or something? Walk around town, go get tea at the cafe, anything. Will she find it uncomfortable? Will she look at me funny and distance herself from me? It was far too sweet of a thought for me to even imagine that she might accept. My chest heaved as I stood there in front of her. The uncertainty acted as a driving force for my heart, but at the same time caused me to shake to my very core. So, a very negative way of looking at it. I couldn't deny that there was a part of me afraid that she might brush off the hand I'd extended to her. And yet, what Shimamura gave me was a warmth, a warm smile.
Ah, ah, mm,
I don't think I really understand, but sure, I look forward to it.
It was there, with that smile, that damn smile that summer began that year. A summer filled with anxiety, where every single day I wanted to start running. Summer break was great. And one good thing? Easy. The mornings. The fact that you didn't have to force yourself to get out of bed.
And yet, here I am.
I grumbled with the upper half of my body lying across the side of the dinner table. The clock on the wall showed that it was currently 7 in the morning. I had spent a long time last night talking with Adachi on the phone, and as a result, my eyelids were once again feeling heavy.
I can't be bothered to wash dishes. So, this'll have to do. If you're feeling tired, then go to bed once you're done eating. Sheesh.
Stated the person responsible for me being awake. In other words, Mom. Before handing me the bowl of breakfast cereal she'd hastily prepared. She then added milk, which in turn proved to be the final push I needed. Giving in to the appeals of my right throat, I pulled my body up from the table.
You're so pathetic in the morning, sis. Really.
The space of judgment came from my little sister, sounding really proud as she said it for some reason. That was the sort of person she was, energetic the second she got up from bed. The kind who'd get up at 6 in the morning and go do rated gymnastics. I wonder, did they still do those at the parking lot nearby? Also, was it just my imagination? Did she sound less respectful than she had in the past when talking to me? If so, then I wonder when that trend began.
This coconut flavor is irresistible.
Yummy, yummy, the girl next to me smacked her lips. As she did, glimmering particles floating off her hair. It was Yashiro. Apparently, my sister had come across her during a radio gymnastics session. Oh, and I didn't mean it like she'd pick her up and bring her back home or anything like that.
The completely nonchalant way in which she was munching cereal made it clear what her true intentions had been.
Hmm.
She sure seemed happy. That was the impression I got while staring at her soft cheeks. For whatever reason, I found myself unable to look away. It was difficult to put into words how I felt about Yashiro. We were effectively strangers, sure, but it just didn't feel right saying it like that. One of the reasons why was found in her behavior. She acted much the same as I had back in the day, and whenever I look at her, I was reminded of the me that I was when. The way she ran with her hands held out in front of her was a good example. That was exactly something I'd done, even if it really wasn't the case. In a weird way, I almost got the feeling that I was watching over her. Mom not saying anything, my sister taking a liking to her, me seeing myself in her, they all likely play a part in making it so. It wasn't always that I thought about things to such an extent, and as I sat there doing just that, something appeared in the back of my mind. Something dark, something clouded. Through this and that, I ended up going through my morning routine. I ate breakfast, and once I was done with that, brushed my teeth and washed my face. I also watched as the two tiny girls cheerfully ran off outside, completely forgetting about homework. Now, what next? Back to bed? That seemed like a good idea, and mere moments later, I was once again lying on my futon, having not yet cleared away. Though my sister had already switched to a mere towel blanket, I always kept to the comforter, even during summer. Doesn't it get hot, you may ask? To which I'd say, yes, yes it does. And yet, the thickness of it just felt so much comfortable over me. There was something motherly about it even. I crawled under the covers and lay on my side, only for my phone to ring the second I got uncomfortable. My head instantly began to hurt. It really did feel like I was being constantly interrupted when all I wanted to do was relax. Still, despite my groaning, it did feel wrong to just ignore the person calling me, and so I slowly crawled out and grabbed my phone off the desk. The fact that I ended up hitting my arm against the table's corner certainly didn't make things better.
Oh, not who I expected.
I figured it would be Adachi, but no. The name display on the screen belonged to Tarumi. When was it that we last met? 2 weeks ago? That's how it is between us currently. Tarumi would call me every now and we'd end up meeting somewhere. Each time, I noticed something new, but also something that hadn't changed. Getting that sort of stimulus in my life, it wasn't bad at all. I picked up the call. Immediately, I heard Tarumi's voice on the other end.
Hi, Shima.
Hi.
The greeting she'd chosen flowed smoothly into my name, almost making it sound like she was addressing someone else entirely.
For a break, huh?
Suppose it's the same everywhere.
Being a student like I was, it only made sense that Tarumi would be currently enjoying her vacation. Well, unless she was part of any school clubs. Was she? I couldn't remember having ever asked her about that. Wait, no. Had I? I wouldn't be surprised. It did seem like a topic that would get brought up during the moments of awkwardness where neither of us knew what to say. Those were still quite common between us. Anyway, if that was the case, it made sense why it wouldn't have left a mark in my mind. Why did I feel it to be necessary to justify my own forgetfulness in this way? Made me resemble Nagafuji.
So, how is it going?
Hmm, pretty okay.
Though in truth, I was just about to go for bed for the second time, I found it difficult to tell her for obvious reasons. Instead, the reply I chose to go was with the dry love.
Um, how about final exams. How did those go?
Oh, you, Taru. The cat began singing somewhere close by, prompting me to lift my head. There, I glanced towards my window, and saw that the sky behind it appeared dazzling, radiant. It was almost like someone had taken a bucket filled with light and turned it upside down. Wherever I looked, all I could see around me were early birds. It might even be that I was the sole exception, and yet, when I went ahead and thought about what I might do, were I able to muster up energy the same way they did, nothing came to mind. Only clouds, clouds and haze.
Hey, Shima, if you like, and I mean it, only if you'd like.
Huh? What?
The amount of preface she was giving the upcoming question caused me to grow a bit stiff. It really did feel like something big was about to be imposed on me. Something good or something filled me with malice. Whatever the case, it did seem like it would be heavy. I could sense Tarumi swallowing the saliva in her mouth. After that, she spoke the following words.
You like to go see the fireworks display next week?
It was there, with that proposition, that summer began that year. A summer which brought me to look up at the shore and wonder what was there beyond it. The end.
The end, indeed.
Finn.
Slightly